Hey everybody, it's Dr. Cody Rall with Techforpsych, and this is the Roxiva Lamp. Now, the Roxiva Lamp is a high-end audiovisual entrainment device that I had a blast using. It uses a stereoscopic technique in which it times the flashing of its LED lights to induce fractal patterns. I mean, it was really like being on a psychedelic experiencing this lamp. So I had a ton of fun using this. Obviously, it has a lot of different other uses like relaxation, meditation, but it was such an enthralling experience to do some of the psychedelic patterns that I was thinking, what is this device doing to my brain? So I really wanted to dive in deeper and use my other gear. And as you know, if you've been watching this channel, I have a lot of gear that can actually track what is happening to my brain as I use this audiovisual entrainment device. I took a look at my different devices and decided that I would try to use the Muse headband, Neurosity crown, and OpenBCI for the experiment. So in this video, I'm going to take you through my process of setting up the experiment, collecting the data, interpreting the data, and give you the pros and cons of each device in how they actually performed in doing the experiment. And then we'll take a look at my brainwaves and see what actually happened to my brain while I was doing this crazy flashing light Roxiva experience. And I can tell you that the results that I found at the end are really interesting, so be sure to stick through to the end of the video to see how it actually turned out. Now, the Roxiva lamp has 16 high-powered LEDs, an audio port for your headphones, USB port for loading new experiences, and a 1/4-inch screw to load onto a tripod of your choosing. I ordered this tripod head with a ball bearing from ArtSize that worked really well. It has a 1/4-inch screw that works great with the Manfrotto tripod that I have, and it also comes with screw adapters for your setup if you need them. Now, if you want to lie down and experience the Roxiva lamp, be a little bit more comfortable, try screwing it onto a boom tripod so that you can suspend it above you as you lie on the floor for your experience. Now, I recommend lowering the light intensity to about 45% on the settings because these lights are quite powerful and can overwhelm you if you're not careful. Drink lots of water because the amount of neuronal discharge in your brain is going to work best if you're well hydrated. And if you want to rock out on Roxiva's great audio tracks, you can put the audio level up to 100 on the 0 to 120 scale on the lamp. Now, it has other tracks other than just the psychedelic experiences. It has tracks for focus, for flow state. I'm still playing around with these. For simplicity of this video, we're going to focus on the psychedelic experience, the LSD light. Now, in choosing devices to do this experiment with, I would have liked to have tried Mendi, but here's where an actual understanding of the mechanisms of these devices becomes important. Because Mendi uses a near-infrared light and a very sensitive sensor that is sensitive to light, using it in this experiment where you have a flashing light in front of your face would totally mess up the signal. So instead of using the F-Nears technology of Mendi, I need to resort to the tried and true EEG technologies in order to best track what's happening to my brainwaves when using this audiovisual entrainment lamp from Roxiva. As for the EEG devices, this brings some light to some interesting pros and cons to each device. The Muse headband is very easy to set up and use with the Mind Monitor third-party app on an iPad, but it lacks sensors on the back of my head to track visual discharges from the occipital lobe. As you know, the occipital lobe, the back of the head, is where visual information of the brain is processed. The Neurosity crown, on the other hand, has a great design for tracking brain function of the occipital lobe, but I did have to have the company design some custom tracking software to compare to the Mind Monitor graphs of the Muse. OpenBCI had the best whole head coverage of each of the devices, but the graphical user interface is complex, and I had a steep learning curve to understand how to actually interpret the data. Of the three, expenses increased from Muse to Neurosity to OpenBCI, so keep that in mind as well. OpenBCI had some really awesome bars and graphs to include the head mapping, but it was lacking a time series graph that I could compare as easily with the Muse and the Neurosity crown. So originally I did a 10-minute control with 10-minute experimental arm, and for the control I basically was just setting a baseline. I put on the device, I was sitting in the dark in front of the Roxiva lamp, but the lamp wasn't on. Just trying to get a baseline of where my brainwaves were at. And of course, for the experimental arm, I would turn on the lamp, see what the brainwaves did, and then compare the two graphs. I made sure to do the control arm in complete darkness so no light would interfere with my brainwaves and affect recordings between the control and the experimental arm. And then I found that actually doing a 30-minute recording was actually a better way to compare light on versus light off and make a more interesting graph. The Roxiva Lamp actually has a handy countdown timer that I set at 10 minutes. So I was able to start the countdown, sit in the dark with the recording device, and then have my assistant hit the EEG record button on my monitor, Neurosity Cloud, or OpenBCI, depending on what device I was using, and then I would sit and wait for the lamp to actually start doing the strobe effect. Now, the psychedelic session is about 14 minutes long. So by the time we hit the EEG record button, I would have about 10 minutes to sit in darkness, waiting for the lamp to come on, 14 minutes in the experience, and then about 10 minutes after the experience sitting in the dark for my brainwaves to calm back down. Now, I can say just doing the experiment itself was actually a pretty wild experience because I would be sitting there with the device in complete darkness, not knowing really how much time had passed. When I meditate, 10 minutes will go very quickly, but if you're just sitting there in anticipation of something happening on a superficial level, those 10 minutes feel pretty long. And I know that light's gonna come on, I just don't know when. And it was pretty jarring when the light actually would come on. I tried not to move too much because that can cause a lot of EEG interference, especially within the delta range. So I'm just sitting there in anticipation, and then boom, when the light and the audio come on from the Roxiva lamp, I could just feel my brain go, whoa, like something's happening here. And then I would go into the experience, which is very enjoyable by itself. The stereoscopic lights do a great job of creating fractal patterns in your visual field to include lattices, tunnels, spirals, and cobwebs, as described by the German psychologist Henrik Kluver. And if you look around with your eyes closed, you actually get a nice variation in colors too. And then what was weird is that after the journey was done, I would be again sitting in complete darkness. It's like the last flashes die down, the audio goes off, and you're kind of just sitting there in pure darkness. And what I noticed is that a lot of the neuronal discharge patterns are still happening on some level. There's a lot of kind of waviness. Even though you're in complete black darkness, it's like you can still tell that your neurons in your brain and the occipital lobe are still stimulated and they're kind of calming down from the experience. We're going to talk to our Roxiva Lamp expert, Raphael, here in a little bit, and what he describes is a complete reset of the brain. And I felt like I definitely experienced that because when I came out of the experiments, I was like, where am I? It just like took a while for my brain to come back online. And I did notice that my internal thought process had calmed down a little bit. So it could be really good for people that are struggling with worry or rumination. Just using the Roxiva lamp as like a system reset, I think could be really helpful. I also had this weird experience sitting in the darkness where it's like I disembodied a little bit. My body felt like it was stretched. Even though my hands were sitting on my lap, it felt like my hands were very far away and floating in space. In some circles, they call that depersonalization, where you feel like you're not really there, that you kind of have been transported to a different space. And I've definitely experienced that in meditative experiences before. So it was really very interesting to be sitting there in the dark after that wild light show and just feeling like my brain was completely reset and that it had sort of separated from feeling in my body. It could be a little jarring at first just because you feel like you're kind of floating in a different space.
The folks that make the Roxiva really put their eye on having this be a very robustly built unit. I mean, first of all, you're dealing with very high power LEDs, which create a lot of heat and they need to blink really fast. So you need all the appropriate technology in there. But also, we wanted to make our product capable of working for the professional that wants to use it, or the client and the individual that wants to use it in their own home.
Now, as far as the EEG recordings go, I was really happy with them because they showed some dramatic effects. You can see as soon as the light goes on that there's a big alpha blocking effect. The alpha wave just takes a deep dive and it stays down during the whole light show and goes back up once the lights calm down. You also get these increasing pulses of beta and gamma waves throughout the session. You can see that the Muse headband graph actually does a better job of showing this, but it's all due to scaling, and they really captured the same events. Notice how these two graphs overall look very similar between two different products in two different recording times, which this is really cool. Going even deeper, we can take a look at specific regions of the brain with each setup. With Mind Monitor using the Muse headband, you could select for temporal, parietal, 9 and 10 positions to see more of the alpha blocking activity that happens in the occipital lobe, and that's picked up on the ear sensors and represented by a larger drop in the blue alpha line on the Mind Monitor graph. Also with the Muse, if you switch it to the anterior frontal 7 and 8 positions, you see more pronounced beta and gamma activity in the frontal lobe of the brain. The same thing goes for the Neurosity data, more alpha drop in the back and more gamma and beta spiking activity in the front. What's nice about the Neurosity data is that I could be more confident about the occipital lobe data because the sensors on the back of the head of the Neurosity system are right over the occipital lobe. But it also made me realize that the beta and gamma spikes in the Neurosity crown graph may not be as pronounced as the Muse graph because the Neurosity sensors do not go directly over the frontal lobe like the Muse sensors do. So what I learned is that with the flickering light of the Roxiva lamp, there's a lot more alpha blocking activity in the occipital lobe and more beta and gamma spikes in the frontal lobe. The closer the sensors are to these regions, the more dramatic changes in frequency amplitudes you will have. This is why the Muse headband shows larger changes in beta and gamma in the frontal lobe because it has that frontal sensor, whereas Neurosity shows a larger dip in alpha frequency in the occipital lobe because its sensors are right over that lobe in the back of the head. Now, keep in mind that this Neurosity software was thrown together in just a few days for this experiment specifically for this YouTube channel. If you really like what you see here, leave comments below and I'm sure we can get them to release a version for the Neurosity community as well. Now, I was bummed that OpenBCI didn't have a more similar graphing feature on their graphical user interface or GUI. If I missed something and one of you watching knows that OpenBCI has a better graph to use, please let me know. Anyways, you can see the alpha blocking at about the 10-minute mark using these bars here. And then the head mapping is really cool because you can see very distinctly the activation patterns in the occipital cortex that, as we talked about before, maps all the visual information from the brain. As far as the performance of these devices in the Roxiva Lamp experiment, I created this little chart. Muse was the easiest to use with the 9 out of 10 just by throwing it on and using the Mind Monitor system on your tablet. It's really easy. Neurosity was a little bit more difficult to set up and troubleshoot and needed some custom software, so I gave it 8 out of 10. And OpenBCI just takes a lot of effort to put together out of the box and learn how to use the software, so I put that one at 6 out of 10. Meanwhile, Muse performed surprisingly well with showing data trends between the front and the back sensors, so I put it at 7 out of 10, even though the back sensors have been accused in the past of having a lot of noise and difficult to isolate signals from the occipital lobe, for example. Neurosity had great data to show, but it was unfortunate that it doesn't have a frontal lobe sensor to better track the beta and gamma spikes, placing it at 8 out of 10. And OpenBCI has full head coverage and great data collection, but was more difficult to graph out trends in the software, so I also put that at 8 out of 10. As far as cost goes, we see that there's increasing cost going from Muse to Neurosity to OpenBCI. I also wanted to compare the Roxiva lamp to another audiovisual entrainment device that I've had on this channel before called BrainTap. If you guys want me to do a more in-depth comparison between these two in the future, let me know in the comments below. Basically, Roxiva definitely beats out BrainTap as the best experience that I've had with audiovisual entrainment with high quality hardware and subjective experience at 9.5 out of 10 compared to 8 out of 10 for the BrainTap. But it is more expensive than BrainTap and it doesn't have as good of navigation of the software like BrainTap, which has its own smartphone app, and that places each for ease of use at 7 out of 10 for Roxiva and 8 out of 10 for the BrainTap. Overall, this was a great experience. I hope you got some ideas about how you can use your devices in experiments and interact with different technologies in a new way and gather data and really show and prove to yourself and, share with the online community these findings that we all can get now that this technology has been democratized. Now, there are a few improvements to the lamp that could go as follows. Some Bluetooth connectivity for the headphones would be nice. Also, to be honest, the user interface is difficult to navigate with just these 3 buttons. You have to press and hold the middle button to go back in the file structure. There's no dedicated power button. So a more versatile user interface or an app actually would be really helpful for navigating the lamp better. easier. If you could just have something on your touch screen, it would allow for more buttons, and I think it would make using the Roxiva lamp a lot easier. Also, the cost. This lamp costs several $1,000s, which is very pricey if you're a individual user. I think it is an investment because, as I said, it really can reset your brain. And if you enjoy audiovisual entrainment, you can really use it to enhance your meditations, your focus, energize yourself, calm yourself down, get to sleep better. There's a ton of settings on here that could be really worth the few $1,000s that you spend on it. If you own a clinic, I would definitely look into getting this lamp for use with your clients because I think it could be a really smart investment for a clinic. And as these psychedelic therapies are coming on, it actually can be used for practice before doing psychedelic therapy. Everything with set and setting and integrating the information, this is important to use with the Roxiva lamp as it would be used with a psychedelic experience. So for clinics that are doing ketamine treatment or even taking a look at doing clinical trials with psilocybin, anything like that, I think this lamp really could prep clients for what they might experience in the psychedelic experience. Obviously, the psychedelic experience is going to be a lot more intense and profound based on the dosing, but the lamp, I think, could do a very good job of prepping people for those experiences. So that was my experience. I hope that you learned something. And if you're interested in the Roxiva lamp, there's a link below in the description where you can go on the landing page that they've created for my audience specifically. Just let them know that Dr. Cody sent you, and there should be some good discussions about if you want to incorporate the Roxiva lamp into your self-improvement or your clinic for your clients. So really fun using those devices with this lamp, and I appreciate Roxiva for giving me the opportunity. This is Dr. Cody Rall with Techforpsych. Talk to you next time.
Being in a relaxed state and not thinking about anything actively doesn't mean that you don't have a bunch of garbage running in the background that you didn't put there. And so taking that default mode network offline is one of the biggest things that the Roxiva can help you do. And really, I like to equate it to shaking the Etch-a-Sketch or, shaking a snow globe. Sometimes you got to just mix things up. You got to create some chaos for things to reorganize in a better pattern. And that's the most powerful thing I think the lamp does, is it really helps you in a controlled fashion shake things up and allow your brain to reorganize in a way that you choose.